For those that don't know Carto, so we are a company started in Spain. We are now an American company. We are around 110 now, and we are the biggest office is in Madrid and also in New York. And we basically create technology to help our clients, organizations, or individuals to leverage location data, to find insights on location data, basically. So one example could be Twitter is one of our clients. So they use Carto technology for analyzing how the people or how the world reacts when something happens. So for example, the Super Bowl is a great example. Is when in the halftime you can see the spike on the tweets and they can analyze what is tweeting about the people. They can analyze from where, so they can help brands to improve their appearance on some particular countries in the United States, and they can analyze how the world reacts to their data. So another client, another use case could be what we do with cities. This is for the city of New York. So we work with the city hall, and we give them technology to analyze how the different KPIs that are relevant for them are evolving over time. So they have a mobile application where they can see if they are having like more crime on a particular zip code, or they have more, I don't know, more accidents, bike accidents. So they can analyze the different KPIs so they can change the city and react almost in real time. Or banks is another of our clients. We have, for example, BBVA. We work a lot with financial institutions since credit card data is a good proxy for human activity. So the amount of data and the amount of insights you can extract from understanding how people is spending their money is huge. So with BBVA, they build products using our technology, so they sell those products to third-party companies or individuals as well, but also we help them to understand their business and to optimize their operations. But as much as I like talking about the future of maps, and we will talk a little bit about the present and the future of maps, I do like to talk about the past. So I think when I research on something, I always go to the past and take a look. So this, we call it location intelligence, but this is not new. This is one of the first location intelligence maps that I found. Is by Leonardo da Vinci. That surprisingly, this guy also made beautiful maps. And this is 1502, and this is a map of the city of Imola. So this city asked Leonardo da Vinci to do a map so they could understand why they were being attacked so many times and they were losing all the time. So this is a quite revolutionary one, since by that time the zenithal angle was not used on visualization, on geographical visualization. So Leonardo da Vinci was one of the innovators. He created this map trying to analyze the context. You see the parcels around the city and the river and the roads, just trying to explain which cardinal points of the city, that's the shape of the circle with the lines, were the most relevant ones for people that were trying to attack Imola, basically. So right now, military services and defense is one of the most, the bigger sectors on geospatial technology. We don't work with military services as a company, but 80% of the work we do is open source in the company, so they can leverage on our technology anyhow. So a few years later, we can see some examples of route optimizations. So as money becomes more relevant, the sea becomes more disputed because of commerce. And this is one of the first maps that is using what is called Mercator Projection. It's now Google Maps, for example, is using Web Mercator, which is the Mercator Projection adapted for the internet. And this is 1594. This geographer created this map that is basically connecting 2 points with a straight line. Before this map, navigation maps couldn't connect 2 points with a straight line. So think how hard it would be to navigate on the seas. So thanks to this map, the Netherlands, a few years later, conquered all this area, which was very rich on natural resources. So for commerce, it was very, very relevant. So that was route optimization. This is another example. This is another kind of visualization. This is linear maps. They don't have like geography references. It's not like the maps that we are used to look at. But you can see here routes. This is from Whitby to Durham, two cities in UK. So this cartographer put the route like in the linear way, but he added like milestones and points of interest, so they were relevant for travelers. So you could see where you were at any time by looking at the map. And this map, this is 1675. This is the first time ever that one of these maps incorporates the concept of a scale. before there was not mathematical relationship between the map and the world. So it was very hard to navigate as well. And route optimization was relevant in the mollusk islands, for example. Think on this, on the Japan Sea. There is more than 300 islands on this sea. Think on how hard it is to navigate through this area with the boats. So you need to arrive from Osaka to Nagasaki, for example, without hitting any of those islands. So this is another example of route optimization in the 17th century, which is quite old now. So I understand that there's a few data scientists. You will know what is a niche model or it could be a projection. So I don't know if you know about Alexander von Humboldt. If not, I would recommend you to read the book. It's called The Invention of Nature. It's quite good. And Alexander von Humboldt basically did this model of all the species and all the plants and mountains on the Americas, on all the mountains on the Americas. So he created this kind of index of at what height the different species were while ascending to El Chimborazo, a mountain in the Americas, and he projected to the whole country. So thanks to this, they started to create like niche modeling and projections on a species by that time, which is actually quite relevant. It's quite innovative by that time. And we saw yesterday on Moebius, on Santiago Ortiz's talk, visualization is also a big part of analysis, of the analysis process, and this is a map showing the correlation between temperature of the water and whale occurrences. So in the 19th century, the best oil for oil lamps was the oil coming from whales. So United States was crazy about getting more production of whale oil, so they asked this Matthew Fontaine to create this map, which is called the whale chart, in order to optimize their operations. It could be compared to now a fleet of trucks, of agriculture, trying to get more resources from the lands, right? So this is the same. So thanks to the map, the production of whale oil, was amazing, was very high, but also they contributed a lot to destroy almost some species of whales, or particular species of whales. And maps have been always like the source of truth. So this is a part of the Great Arc expedition. The Great Arc is how they measured the India and all the mountains on India. And this map is showing all the measurements. This project is amazing. It's something similar to crowdsourcing, but for measuring a country. It sounds like a Kickstarter, but way harder, right? So this was all the measurements taken in order to measure the highest mountain on Earth, which is the Mount Everest. And this is, again, 1858. We always say that everything happens somewhere, and this map is trying to show that. This could look like a census map, but I call it like official with double quotes on it, a map of Chinatown, because it's a map that was created by the Californians, where a lot of Chinese immigrants were arriving to San Francisco. So they started this Chinatown neighborhood in San Francisco, and they started to map all the vices, all the Chinese population. So what you see in yellow is buildings where there is Chinese population, but what you see on red and blue is prostitution. What you see on yellow is high consumption of opium, and what you see on other colors is gambling, basically, on different variants of gambling. So they were trying to explain the world how bad it was immigration by that time, particularly from China in San Francisco. This is 1889. This is Charles Booth. He's not a cartographer, he's a philanthropist. And he created this map, this concept of hypergrowth in startups. It was the same, but for cities. By that time, London was the most populated city on Earth, and they grew so fast that the city was very, very unequal. But they were so big that they didn't realize. So Charles Booth had the theory that London was becoming a very bad place for living. So what he did was investing his own money on creating these poverty maps, so they could use these maps a few years later to improve the city of London, or how it was to live in the city of London. This is 1916, and this is, I'm gonna stop for a minute here, because this is showing how important is location for the core business of some companies. So think that right now, companies like Uber, like Airbnb, like Instacart, or Cabify, or almost any mobile company wouldn't even exist without location data. So the fact that location is at the core of Uber, of Airbnb, is making their business possible. So this was, actually I think this is one of the first companies ever with location at its core. core business. This is a Sambor company, it's an insurance company, and what they did is creating a census of all the buildings of more than 12,000 cities in the United States, and they track and measure every building material, the foundry type, the commercial activity on the buildings, the energy consumption, everything about the buildings. What they were trying to create was a risk model in order to improve their business, but also to tell the world how cities should be done in order to avoid big fires in the downtown, like in Chicago, for example. And maps are beautiful. I mean, we could spend the whole morning looking, or the whole afternoon looking at maps, but they are beautiful even when they have horrible stories behind it. So this is a map showing all the consequences of the bombing during the Second World War on London again. And darker the buildings become, the highest the damage is on those areas. So this is critical. When you have a problem, affecting the environment, a city of forest, something like that, without a map, there is no way you can take action. So thanks to these maps, they could reconstruct the city of London a few years later as well. And another map, beautiful map, William Bruns, this guy has a pretty special style, but look at the story behind this map. It's commuters running over black children in a particular area of Chicago. This is crazy. I mean, this is so sad. And I will tell you a little bit later in my talk why this map is so relevant for it. So this is location. For 80% of data that we generate has a location dimension on it, and only 10% of that data is being used now by organizations, so by us in our analysis. So after the second industrial revolution, technology was massively democratized. Microsoft and Apple were starting to sell their personal computers. Microchips were cheaper than ever to product. But maps, they didn't change that much. Location has been always on the dark room on big corporations, and for creating maps on a computer, you used to have a master degree on a particular proprietary software. And this is why Carto was born. We wanted to change that. That's what we call the dark era of location intelligence, and it's basically a market that is almost a monopoly where a single private company is the only one that is leveraging location data. So why we think, or why do I think that maps are more important than ever right now? Apart from the examples from Uber and Airbnb that are successful companies using location at their core, why maps are so relevant? So there are 4 things. First, this is a quote by Al Gore. This is 1998. Google Maps and Google Earth, they were released in 2005. So it was 7 years before Google Maps appeared, actually. And Al Gore was asking for a 3-dimensional model of Earth with massive amounts of data on it. This is how we understand maps now. This is Google Maps on Chrome browser. This is the Carto office in Madrid. We now think that maps should be are like this. And yes, they are like this, but there is a huge amount of technology behind all this to make all these beautiful imagery available. So what things are changing? The first thing is the digitalization of humans. Maps has been a niche for experts for a long time, and now it's changing. Maps are no longer created by cars owned by Google taking photographs. Maps are created by you. Maps are created by me with our data. The fact that we have sensors in our pockets, we have sensors in our arms, we have sensors in our feet, we have sensors, even a coffee machine has sensor on it. The fact that we are releasing all that data to the world is opening a lot of possibilities for creating this amount of maps. Now, Uber is able to recreate every street on Manhattan in 45 minutes. Every 45 minutes, every street on Manhattan is being mapped by an Uber driver, which is crazy. And this is showing us new behaviors that we didn't have access before, right? So for example, this is a project developed using Carto technology by a company from Sevilla, which is called Geographical, and this is a project trying to leverage indoor location data. This is a a very big mall, and you have here the amount of people that is going in every common path, the amount of people that is searching for a particular thing from where. You can even track the employees with this technology, and you can optimize the way you do commissions to them in order to incentivize them to sell more, for example. You can compare on time, and this is real, right? This looks like futuristic, but it's real. So the second thing is digitalization of humans, but also cities and being digitized. I mean, street lights have sensors on them. Trash containers, we put sensors on them. The streets, I mean, they count how many people is walking on every street every minute with a sensor, which is cheapest than ever to produce. I mean, the whole city is being digitized, and the amount of opportunities that it is opening for changing cities or designing better cities are huge. So, for example, this is another project developed with Telefonica, and they use Fireware for gathering all these IoT data, and this is how they use, or the Carto for reporting on this data, but also for generating new models on top of this data. So if I have data on real-time data on which trash containers are full, I can send my trash trucks on demand. So I don't need to wait until next morning in order to gather all the trash. I could save some, I could contaminate less, I could save some money, I could save some energy by not doing every day the same route with the trash truck. I can optimize it, I can create those paths in real time. And the fact that everything is being digitized is not only the things that we can see, it's that over our heads, a lot of things are happening right now. I mean, I'm sure some of you will have a drone at home, a drone recording video in high definition. That means that you have a sensor, a very powerful sensor in your drone, in your hands, that you can fly over everything, and you can gather imagery and then infer some information. But not only drones, satellites are changing massively. In 4 or 5 years, we will have doves of satellites gathering real-time information of the whole globe. Every 5 minutes, a satellite will pass over our heads. And it will be a satellite with high technology. That means that we can count people, we can identify cars. But when I say identifying, it's not counting them. It's not identifying a car. It's saying which brand, which model, the price of each car. We can identify or count trees. I mean, the amount of possibilities that this is opening is huge. And it's only based on location. Think that for all these ideas, the only common index for correlating information is where things happen. Is that location index. You can correlate things with things that are around you, and it's the only way we have for joining different data sets. So it would then be great, for example, to track like how deforestation is happening in real time, where you can still do something to stop it. So we did it.
There's an old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? The truth is, we've all heard shocking statistics about deforestation, like the world's forests are being destroyed at a rate of 50 soccer fields every minute. But there's still a lot we don't know, and a lot we don't hear, like when and where forests are cleared, why it happens and who is responsible. And most of the time when deforestation is eventually identified, it's already too late. This is why the World Resources Institute and partners have developed a groundbreaking initiative to monitor the world's forests in near real time. This is Global Forest Watch. Cutting-edge algorithms harness the power of satellite technology and cloud computing to identify where trees are growing and disappearing. Data that would have taken years to process can now be viewed and analyzed in a matter of seconds with Global Forest Watch.
Again, this sounds like futuristic. This is happening right now. This project has now like 4 years. It's 4 years old. And I mean, every minute we are deforesting a part of Earth that is bigger than a soccer court. So this is the only way we can detect those things. And this is the only way we can actually take action on these kind of things. And now the gap is closing. So think that now we have autonomous cars that drive themselves with data that is being generated by other autonomous cars that drive themselves. That means that the role of humans in all this data ecosystem is nothing. I mean, we don't count anymore. I mean, cars are generating more than 4 terabytes of data every single day. These 4 terabytes of data. You can look at the face of the journalist. The journalist is the one that is not driving, and how scared he is of this thing, right? So think that these cars are training artificial intelligence models within the car. Satellites, when they take imagery, they don't send the imagery back to Earth anymore. They do I mean, they run their neural networks, they train the models on the satellite, they process the imagery on the satellite, and they just send the data that is relevant. So this is creating a lot of data, but also a lot of valuable data. You remember the map that I mentioned of the commuters? So how it will be now with the technology that we have. So if we take all those yellow points, this is a screencast from the browser, but if we take all those yellow points are schools in Berlin, and then we have GPS data of cars. All those blue lines are like aggregations of cars. Now, if we create a model that can correlate the density of traffic with the average speed of the cars that are just passing in front of schools, we can actually generate models that help us to predict the probability of a commuter running over a children at rush time, right? During morning or when they get to school and when they get out of school. So this analysis can be only done using location data. And this is the things that we are starting to realize now and companies are starting to realize. So now we all, and we know, right? We live in this connected world. I mean, the fact that we can order something in Amazon and we have it in 14 minutes delivered by a drone in our backyard, that's the connected world. The fact that we can listen to any song at any time from whenever we want, that's the connected world. The fact that social networks know if we have broke up with our partner before we announce to the world, that's the connected world. I mean, we are all connected. That is amazing. That's why we are here, right? We are all generating businesses all around this connected world. But at the same time, we are more vulnerable than ever. I mean, we have the opportunity, and I'm not saying in the pessimistic, I'm saying it in a very optimistic way. It's like we have now the opportunity of using this connected world for good and not for bad. And this is the responsibility that we have now. So that's why I believe that democratization is playing a key role. These are like a very common quote, right? Data is the new oil, wherever. We don't want data to be the new oil. Think on the amount of bad things that oil has generated. I mean, the only way we can avoid doing that is by democratizing the access to technology so we can extract the knowledge from all that data. And that's what we try to do at Carto, by the way. So now is the technology part of the talk. And I wanted to give you like a brief summary and mention a challenge that we are working on, we are researching on now, and try to explain you how we are trying to solve it. But anyway, as I said, 80% of the code that we do is open source. All this is on GitHub. You can grab it, or even if you want, you can do a pull request. We would love to see you committing to the code. So power of location needs to be unleashed, and I'm gonna mention a challenge. For me, one of the things that is going to happen is that we can now generate a real-time census of the world. Just by putting together data from telcos and from banks, we can have a census of the whole globe that is updated in real time. That means that stronger companies will become more strong, and stronger and stronger and stronger, and weak or small companies will have very, very little opportunities of succeeding. But that's as an organization. Think on individuals. Think on the difference, on the difference that makes that Amazon can know everything about you, and you don't know anything about yourself. You know less than Amazon about yourself now. This needs to change. And in this real-time census, this is crazy. I mean, the connected world is amazing, but it's also getting us back to the centralization. We put a lot of effort on decentralizing things, and we are centralizing data on private companies. Imagine what will happen if this gets real. So what this means in terms of data, well, we think that it's billions of rows that needs to be processed every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes. Those are billions from rows from telcos and billions from rows from banks, imagine, and billions of rows coming from satellites. So this is a near map. This is a company that takes like aerial imagery, high definition. And I'm going to use this example for explaining the first part of the process. So for working with geospatial data, we need to do now like 4 main things. Of course, a lot of stuff is going on. But the first is linearizing the data, because most BI tools work with data in a single dimension. We need to work in 2 dimensions, X and Y, and then all the attributes. Then after linearizing the data, we need to aggregate it. There is no way you can process like billions of rows all the time. We need to analyze it, and then we need to visualize it. So very basic. The programmers, they don't let me code anymore, so I will not get into detail, but we have people from our team here. So we have planes. When we vectorize this data, what we do normally is creating what we call a quad key index, which is using an index that we generate using a quad tree. So basically, for those that don't know what is a quad tree, we split the data or the map in squares, and then every square gets divided in as much as 4 squares, and so on, and so on, and so on. So that led us to linearize the data, to linearize the index of the data. So from having the x and y coordinate, we go and have like a single index that is giving us all the information. And this index is very useful for us for extracting the data, for processing the data, for aggregating the data, but also for knowing where to look for new data. So after linearizing, what we do is aggregating. And for aggregating, what we are doing is using, data cubes from BI. So we created something, a standard format is open source, it's called TileCube, which is using the idea of the tiles of the maps, but also trying to use the concept of the data cube so we can add more dimensions to them. So basically, on tile cubes, we have like x coordinate, y coordinate, and then we have the different values, for example, over time. This is how a tile cube looks like. This is a particular point on a tile, right? So we have values, and we have values over time, x, y, and values over time. So by aggregating data, we don't need to process every point for every analysis. We can play with different levels of aggregation. So this supports like aggregation by pixel, for example, and you can aggregate by 1 pixel to 512 pixels, for example. So you can play with the different aggregation depending on the zoom level that you do on the map or depending on the precision that you need for doing analysis. Then after this, and this is what Moebio told us yesterday, is analysis. It is true. There is a new player, which is called sometimes the citizens data scientists, other times it's everybody. We are all aiming to do data science somehow. So we believe that analysis needs to be done visually, and we implemented like an analysis workflow which is based on nodes in a chain that are paired on a chain. So for example, you have all data on the left, and then you do a sampling algorithm, for example, then you do a k-means algorithm, then you filter, and then it's the user which is getting the insights. So what happens when we analyze something is that when we change a parameter of every analysis of any of those analysis nodes, we just recalculate the part that is needed. So basically, we are caching a lot of data. Every intermediate node is cached for the time that is needed, basically. And this is how an analysis looks like for us. So Carto has tons of technologies behind, but it's SQL since the last step is done in PostgreSQL and PostGIS. So we can play with all the geospatial power of PostGIS and play with SQL. We can actually run some Python and R code as well for doing analysis. And then the last step is optimization for visualization, right? So for analysis, we can use the same quad key. We can go in detail, and we can, for example, for calculating the closest point to any other point, we don't need to scan all data. We use the quad key that we generated for linearizing the data to start looking for data that is already closer, because we can infer that information from the index. And then for visualizing, which is the last step, we use torque.js is one of the libraries that we use that is rendering data on the client, and this is the same map that I showed you before. So those tile cubes have information about every point at any timestamp, so we can actually draw that data directly on the browser, so the user experience is good, and the animation is smooth, and you can see actually living data. So this is how we are tackling the challenge of processing, analyzing, visualizing like billions of rows over time. And we are testing with different technologies behind. But the most important thing is that this is a reality. So location is almost like forgotten all the time. And what we are realizing is that by using location, you can optimize massively the operations of companies. There is a very good example of FedEx, a recent example of FedEx. And this delivery company, what it's done is creating their own routing algorithm, which is making paths that are turning almost always right, because of the probability of having an accident when turning right on an intersection is way lower than the probability of turning left. And they proved that by doing that new routing algorithm, they are saving tons of money. Think on how easy is the idea, and think on how far it looks like to do an analysis like that. So that was all. I hope the siesta time was not that hard with you guys. But if you have any question, I would love to respond. Thank you very much.